Hello, everyone. I can see that all the attendees are coming back in. Sorry for the delay. We have a few issues with Verne's computer trying to connect. So now we have him in and the presentation is sharing on the screen, but unfortunately we cannot get his camera to work. So he's going to be just doing the speech with the slides. Also, in terms of commenting and Q&A, if you have any question, you can please raise your hand and we will be giving you access to talk at the very end so you can ask your question. So Verne can also answer without having to use the Q&A or any of Zoom features to write. Okay, so if you can let us know in the chat that you understood that. Perfect. Thank you so much. So Verne, here you go. You can start your presentation and you can move forward as you will do with the PowerPoint and the slides. Okay?
Hello. Thank you so much for all the help getting this started. My apologies for delaying the show. And I still don't know why, but we're going to go on through here. And the first slide shows two books that I've written. The first one is It's Your Future, Make a Good One. The second one is Small Business Foresight. And it isn't that I've sliced a piece of the book off there, it's that that corner of the book is black and blends into the screen. Who am I? Now I realize that there's a whole lot of people who have presented that are old friends, but I have to assume that most of the people who are still here have no idea who I am. So just a little bit of background. I have been in small business most of my adult life, primarily in international trade, exporting to most parts of the world, Europe, India, the Far East. The last part of it, since about 1990, I've been just a one-person business, plus a contract bookkeeper. That has been, that was a pretty successful business. I've added the line about multi-million-dollar sales, not to brag, but because I saw a book recently that seemed to think that it was a very important milestone when a small business had million-dollar sales. I know a lot of small businesses that are in multi-million-dollar sales. And a lot of them, like me, are one-person businesses. In the late 90s, I found out about the MBA program at the University of Houston, Clear Lake, and decided it was time to do that. I was getting close to retirement age. And I took several classes to qualify, signed up, and started my first semester. I took a course called World Futures, and that was with Wendy Schultz. By the time Wendy got me through that course, I knew where I wanted to be, and I changed my major to studies of the future. Scanning, trends, scenarios, strategic planning. These are things I'd never heard of. Now, I'm in my 60s here, and I've had a career business all this time, and these were all new things. Well, they weren't just new to me. The whole world seemed to be writing books arguing about scenarios and strategic planning, the pluses and minuses. But it was an exciting time. They're great methods, and they worked. They worked for big business. And that is what we're going to talk about today. Our methods in foresight and future studies were all designed by big business for big business. And I really became aware of that when I was doing my last paper before my master's degree. I had to do a paper that laid out a personal strategic plan, and it gave me fits. I got it done. I got a good grade for the paper. But my problem was it was all about the forces of change, steep. In some of our classes, I had heard people say that everybody should know this. And I thought that was true. I agreed with that. And when I realized that personal futures for individuals was difficult to do with the methods as I had learned them, I enrolled in a PhD research program at Leeds Metropolitan in the United Kingdom. The University of Houston had a relationship with Leeds, primarily because of Graham May, who was the head futurist there at Leeds at that time. He and Jeff Gold became my advisors over the next 5 years. 5 years because this was a part-time program. I had to keep running my business. This was a distance program. Everything was done from Texas. And this was before Google. This was before really a good internet connection. I was using dial-up connection to do my research. I went to the library at the University of Texas and talked to the librarian there about access to books and databases and so on. They signed me up as a scholar, gave me a card, which I still have, and I had access to those databases. You don't understand how important that was until you try to do research without access. Take your computer and your net away, and you are right where I was at that time. I chose to study aging and personal futures. And I did a lot of research. I talked to lots of people. I sent out lots of questionnaires. And most of the people I talked to were over 60. Exploring and preparing for your future. That's what I was looking at. How can I help individuals explore and prepare for their futures? Well, I started with, what do most futurists believe? From Wendell Bell's book, the future is not predetermined. Some futures are better than others. Actions we take in the present can influence the future. And that was the foundation for my research, personal futures. People want to know the future. People have been trying to know the future for as long as there have been people, because somebody would promise the individual that they knew the future, they would tell them the future for a price. Clear up into the 50s and 60s, cities all over the United States had little stores, usually not in the high rent district, but stores with a sign in the window to read your fortune through a crystal ball or cards or seance or whatever. They were everywhere. And they were heavily patronized. People wanted to know. 3 steps to learn about your personal future. 1, understand your life. Where are you now? Where do you want to go? Where do you want your life to be 10 years from now? Okay, this was the real breakthrough. I remember Shakespeare talked about the 7 ages of man. Well, as I was working on my research, and I'd been spending some time on it by the time I got to this point, and I realized that this set of stages of life showed us the future. It's the only place I know in future studies where we have a map of the future. In this case, we have 10 time frames, 10 images of the future, 10 important changes in life, a map of the future for individuals. The first stage, obviously, is infant. The next stage is child. These two combined take about the first decade of life. Then we become teenagers, adolescents, for another 10 years. In your 20s, you become a young adult, old enough to vote, you completing school, starting a career, starting to think about marriage and a family. This is your 20s. In your 30s, you are probably well into your career, becoming established. You've probably changed jobs a few times, and you're starting to settle in. And you're raising children. In your 40s, you start middle age. Your children are grown. Pretty soon you're going to have grandchildren. Middle age, my estimation, lasts about 20 years. And then we go to the independent stage. The independent stage starts at age 60. And of course, this, for one reason or another, is when many countries have decided it's time for retirement. Social Security starts in some cases at 60, or on up to 67. But the 60s are a time of independence. A lot of people go from the independent stage, stay in the independent stage for the rest of their lives. But I added 3 more stages. We've covered the 7 stages of man that Shakespeare talked about. But I decided that we ought to recognize that when you get past 60, when you get a little older, you are very possibly going to go into vulnerability. Vulnerability means that you don't need anybody with you all the time. You may not need a helper anytime, but you're vulnerable. You may fall, you may have a risky heart condition. There are lots of things that can happen that make a person vulnerable. This is Sai. I met him in Thailand. We were both on a tour and we were going to the hotel. He went up, started into the hotel just ahead of me, and it was a high step, and he reached up and took the step and fell backwards right into my arms. Well, that was the start of a nice friendship that went on for many years. The next stage is the dependent stage, and this is where you need a little help. You may not need help 24 hours, but you may need help part of the day with your medications, with getting in and out of the shower or at the bed or getting to the doctor's office, all the things that happen in the dependent stage. And in each of these stages, you can go to the end of life. Dependence, you may be in the dependent stage for the rest of your life. Or you may go into the end of life stage, which in the United States, the government has decided is the last 6 months of life. When the doctor says this person is not going to live beyond 6 months, then they are entitled to medication that keeps them comfortable rather than tries to cure them. So those are 10 stages of life. Well, okay, now we have a map on the way to the future. We have to deal with the forces of change in your life. These are the forces that I selected. Activities, the things that we do, our job, the things that we do to play, tennis, golf, just go running with the kids, all the things we do. Finances, income, assets, expenses, liabilities, everything to do with money. Health, physical, mental, care, every aspect of health. Housing. Where are you going to live? Are you going to live in an apartment? Do you live in a mansion? Do you live in a tent underneath a freeway someplace? Everybody has housing. Some have better than others. Social. All the people that we associate with, family, friends, relatives, everybody that we associate with. This includes people that we work with. Transportation. When I first started, I think my very first workshop at the World Future Society, somebody challenged me on this. That how can transportation be a force in your life? And I pointed out that I had spent time in a number of countries where people walked long distances to get water. They didn't have bicycles. They didn't even have roads. They walked any place they went. If they had to go to see a doctor, they walked. If they went to the store to buy something, they walked. And they walked to get their water in the morning. So I haven't had much disagreement on that since. This combination of life stages and practical forces of change provide a foundation for personal futures. Step 2, now that you have a foundation for your life, you want to explore what are your alternative futures. And here we go into scenarios. I advocate 4 scenarios or more. Clem Beazle told me this when I was just starting out. He said, if you tell people that they can have 3 possible futures, 3 scenarios, they'll make 3 and then they'll pick the middle one. Make them create 4 futures or more, and then they'll make some serious choices. Step 3, strategies and plans for your future. Personal strategic planning. Start with a vision of the next stage of your life. Plan the actions that will lead you to achieving that vision. Make strategies to deal with that vision. Now you have a plan. Double check it. I cannot overemphasize. People will make a plan and not double check it, and they'll have a problem later. This doesn't happen just to people. This happens to big organizations. Can you imagine the person who was responsible for that project? Well, it happens. It just happened. Computers, I think, are helping, but still things like this happen. So double check your work. That is the essence of this book, It's Your Future, Make It a Good One. I published that in early, I guess, 2011. And in 2012, I received an award from the Association of Professional Futurists for the most important futures work of the year. I'm very, very proud of that, that award. This was self-published. I self-published with CreateSpace, which is a part of Amazon, or used to be. It's folded into KDP now. And KDP is now using AI, which complicates things, but still, it's a good way to get published. Next, the next book, the next batch of research follows the pattern of the first book. As a matter of fact, I even use some of the headings for chapter headings and so on in Small Business Foresight. Because the concept, everything is the same, except this is for a business, not for an individual. And so theoretically, I should be telling people you need both books. But Small Business Foresight, I just published right at the end of last year. And so it's still getting out into circulation. It's available through bookstores all around the world, but they don't have it in stock. They have to order it off their computer. So you'll have to wait a day or two. But the book is available. It is distributed through Ingram, which is very good distribution. The foresight methods are the same traditional methods that you use every day. For large organizations primarily, I've made 2 modifications, just as I did in the first book, Stages of Business Development. Now, I didn't invent the stages of business development, but I did do a little research on the web. And if you go on Google, you'll find that a lot of people have written about business development stages. Some have lots of stages, some have not so many. But they recognize that as a business develops, not necessarily grows, but at least as it develops, it goes through certain stages. In addition to that, I did the same thing with the forces of change. The forces of change in a business are different than they are in your personal life. So we set up a new set. Section 1. Now, I'm not going to go into the same detail here that I did in the personal futures book, because most of it follows the same pattern, but I'm going to emphasize the differences. So section 1 is look at your business and where you are now. 9 stages of business development. The concept. This is the idea. This is the idea that you or you and friends come across, either talking with each other, maybe a few beers in the tab that night, or in a restaurant, or any place. On the back of a napkin, lots of businesses, good businesses, have started out in very small ways. Planning. The next step is planning. Test your business. Put everything on paper. Decide all of the things that you have to do to organize your business, where it's going to be, who's going to do everything, what you're going to make, how you're going to sell it, how you're going to transport it. Figure out all of those things in the planning stage. Because once you start your business, it's not the time to go back and figure out how you're going to do it. Startup. Now your business exists. You're in business and you're testing your concepts in the real world. The third stage is struggling and surviving. And very truthfully, a lot of businesses do not get beyond this stage. A lot of businesses are started with what looks like a good idea, but maybe it wasn't. I started a little business with a friend while I was still in college. It was a great idea. It was making foam plastic underwear for scuba divers who were diving in very cold waters like the Puget Sound. The problem was there weren't very many of us, so we saturated the market and closed the doors and went on to do other things. But that is not untypical. That happens in a lot of businesses. They don't think through the fact that this is a great idea, but there's not enough market. Growth. Okay, you've gotten beyond struggling. You are growing. Sales and revenues are increasing. You can sleep at night. Maturity. You're established. You're maintaining a balance. You've got continuity. You could stay in this way. Everything about your business could stay just the same. And you've been in retail places, restaurants, or shops, and so on, that have done exactly that. They reached maturity and they stopped. There was no need. They were getting the income they needed. Why beat the head against a wall? but a lot of others expand. They want a little growth. Maybe it's just modernization, but they may change the physical plant, clean up the buildings. They may add a location or two, or expand the space that they have, get some new equipment or faster equipment, more personnel, add new products, enter new markets. Decline. Profits start to shrink. The business starts feeling stale. You're tired of it. Everything is aging, and maybe you too. You have to make a decision. How are you going to close the business? Now, I advocate that you should talk this over yourself before you start the business. How are you going to get out? What's going to cause you to get out? Now, keep in mind, we were looking at people leaving businesses. It isn't that the business goes bad in every case. For sometimes, everything just changes. Keep in mind, IBM came out with their personal computer in the early 80s. IBM was also one of the world's largest manufacturers of typewriters. Their Selectric typewriter was just the typewriter. But 10 years after the personal computer came out, the entire typewriter industry was gone. There may have been a few stragglers still left, but it was a dead business. It was just like when we started building cars and roads. The people that rode horses and drove buggies had to go someplace else. So there are lots of reasons why you exit this business, but you're going to have to decide, are you going to sell your business? Are you going to transfer it to your children? Now, I thought about that. I asked my grandchildren and my own children, were they interested in taking over my business? This was a good business. It paid well. There was no interest at all. So in 2008, I called all my people that I worked with overseas and told them that I was going to close. I recommended the relationships with some of my suppliers in the US. I called all my suppliers and recommended buyers. And some of them followed through on that. But it was a decision that all of these people were personal relationship. I could not sell personal relationships. It would not have worked. So I didn't, and I have no regrets. Actually, I still have the same corporation, and I sell books through that corporation. 6 forces of change in a small business. A small business, a smaller focus than the steep categories. Well, that was the same thing we found in personal futures. The steep categories don't fit a small business. In small business, of course, finance is right at the heart of it. Payables, receivables, payroll, budget. Location. The traffic. Retail businesses are important. Traffic is important. And so they look for a location where traffic will find them, or they have huge parking areas where people can park their cars. The zoning. A retail business has different zoning requirements than a manufacturing business. Offices, access, a home. A lot of businesses are in homes. The latest statistics I've seen, there are about 30 million small businesses in the United States alone, and more in other countries. 30 million. 25 million of those businesses have no employees. Yes, you heard that right. No employees. Now, some of those are, maybe they're an Uber driver and they're a contract worker for one reason or another. So they They don't appear really to have a business, but they do file taxes. But still, there's a lot of people who are sitting at a computer just like I am today, and many of you are as well, conducting a business without any employees. I had a contractor bookkeeper when my business was larger, but I didn't have any employees. Management. Management includes the officers and the owners, probably somebody representing the accounting, or accountant, and a legal advisor. And those are the people who make the decisions that run the company. Marketing. Local, national, and international. And you're going to have to decide which of those markets you are in and then go pursue it. Forces of change: finances, location, operation, management, marketing, people. Section 3, explore your future. 4 or more scenarios, same as for personal futures. Create a future for your business. Create a vision, strategy, and an action plan. Follow your plan. Any questions? Well, we don't have a hookup for questions just yet, so I'll see you on the other side. There's the Small Business Foresight book. I thank you very much. There's my email address, and I have 3 website addresses, but they all go to the same place. Come visit me. Send me an email if you have questions or suggestions. I would certainly like to hear from you.
Okay, Verne, thank you very much. Please, to everyone attending, you can use the menu to raise your hand, and we will give you access to use your mic, so you will be asking the question by voice, okay? If you can raise the hand again, we have 2 questions over there. Ah, there we go. So 1 minute. Yeah, I don't know how to do it exactly. No, I'm afraid we can't do that because I don't, it's not allowing us to speak.
Okay, well, can you relay the question?
Yes, if you can write the questions, we can read them out loud for him.
Okay, I may do it in very brief form, but fire away.
Yes. We have here a question from Veronica Narvaez, and she's asking if you can give an example of an organization, of a small business.
Oh, retail stores are small businesses. Restaurants are generally small businesses. Some of them grow to be big businesses. People who are futurists, who work from their own computer, who act as consultants or advisors. Many of those are small businesses. And those are can be very small businesses. Restaurants and retail stores may grow. A lot of small businesses grow up to be big businesses.
Okay, she's adding that she also wants to know an example of someone who used this methodology successfully being a small business.
Me.
Okay, and someone apart from you. How was that used?
I'm trying. Well, I just started selling the book, so I don't have anybody that I can. I know that there are a number of futurists who follow these same concepts, Let's see, there's a lady in Turkey that is a futurist and has started out using my first book and then followed the same concepts. There are businesses in Mexico and South America who got the Spanish edition of my personal futures workbook, and then they acquired the Small Business Foresight workbook. The workbook for small business came out several years ago, and then I took kind of a leave of absence from writing to spend time working with the Association of Professional Futurists, and then returned to the book 2 years ago. So it's difficult for me to come up with specifics because I have not been consulting. I've been writing the books, and other futurists have been advising people. Veronica, did I answer your question?
Yes, so we have another question from Patty Liu, and she's saying, thank you for your presentation, Dr. Wheelwright. I believe you have a great framework for designing futures applicable at personal and business level. But do you feel this is a mechanism for building resilient futures on a larger scale? How did you decide on what to change in the methodologies to apply to the use cases you have explained so well?
Well, Patty, thank you very much. And thank you for the compliments. And well, how did I do this? The research that I did on older people was the key. First of all, I went through the school at the University of Houston Clear Lake. So I completed that, earned my master's degree there. So now I was a futurist, and then I went on and worked these methods out over a period of 5 years. I'm still working on it. I talk to other futurists a lot, and I see what other people are doing. I see futurists, some are starting to talk to people about personal futures. And for futurists, I would suggest that there is a market. And I'm not pursuing this market myself yet, but there is a market for workshops and for consulting with small businesses. Remember, just because a business is small does not mean they cannot afford a consultant. And of course, if you do workshops, they get consulting in a group, and that makes it far more economic. But if you talk to Chamber of Commerce or Small Business Administration, or any kind of an organization where small businesses congregate, there you will find opportunities to be a futurist for.
We have another question from Cassiana Buosi, and she's asking, how did you sell foresight projects to this target that usually cannot afford it? They don't have the money to spend in this type of projects.
Well, I'm working on the easy side. I'm going to sell them the book if I can. But because a business is small, don't presume that they can't afford to hire your services. Talk to them, contact them, and ask them what they need. Ask them, what do they understand about our methods, and do they understand the benefits? If they're paying for a CPA, they can probably pay for a futurist as well. Now, as I say, I'm not out in the field chasing that business myself, but if I was 25 years younger, I would be, because I have a lot of confidence in futures methods. And I know that people in small business are a lot easier to work with than some of the people in big business. Small people don't feel like they already know it all. And I'm sure you've run into those people in the corporations.
We have another question from Fernanda Ebert, and she's asking, which methodologies would you say are essential when you're applying foresight for the personal side or the small businesses?
Well, if you're going to deal with futures, I think you have to give them the whole package. You have to educate them about the forces of change, the stages that their business is going to go through. And then you need to show them about scenarios, how they can look into the future 10 years ahead. When I went to the University of Houston Clear Lake, I'd been in business a lot of years, and I didn't have a clue how to think about the future. And a lot of businesses today are simply looking from day to day, week to week, month to month. And if they are a month ahead in their planning, they are probably ahead of most of the others. As I say, I feel that there's a real market. And I think that the way to approach it is to start with some place like the Chamber of Commerce and tell them, look, I'm a futurist, and I think that I have something that people should know, how to build scenarios, how to do strategic planning. Everybody has heard about strategic planning, but an awful lot of people don't know how to do it. And in a corporation, the persons that are doing strategic planning have a degree in business and or strategic planning. So you've got career people managing strategic planning and all of our other methods. So don't be shy, attack them. You know, what's the worst thing that somebody can say to you? Well, I'm not interested. Okay, go to the next one. If you're going to have to sell yourself and your products. Don't oversell. I would suggest when I was doing my first book, I did workshops. I loved doing workshops, and I met people in my workshops. There's two ladies that were in my very first workshop at the World Futures Society in 2006 in Toronto. I still am in touch with those two ladies. Both of them translated my book into their language. One was Turkish and one was Spanish. This going out and setting up workshops, sometimes you'll show up for a workshop that a chamber or a group has set up for you, or even a lunchtime dinner group. Talk to them for only half an hour and tell them what you're doing. But go out and meet people, let them know who you are and what you are doing. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I sold thousands of books of the first book, Personal Futures, just doing that and going to World Future Society meetings. You have to chase the customers. You have to go out and find them. And that's hard for some people. Sometimes it's impossible. Okay, send them an email and say, hey, this is what I do. Would you give me the time for a cup of coffee and see if this is something that your business could use? And if one person says, well, I can't afford it, ask him, how about if I find two other people, and then the three of you can get the same advice and split the bill. Again, don't be shy about going out and asking people for business. It's hard, I know. And you have my email. You'll find me very supportive. Be glad to help you any place I can.
Okay, we have a few more questions if you still have time.
I have time.
Okay, so we have Karen Tucker, and she's asking, with regard to the 9 stages of developing a business plan, which STEM is most often not considered?
No, none of them think that they're going to be the one that struggles and fails. When people start a business, they do not expect to fail. And in many cases, that's the reason they do fail. So they need guidance when they're in that planning stage, and especially in the startup stage. And you're going to have to do to them like I just did to you and say, go out and knock on doors. You have to get enough business coming through your front door to keep you fed. If you can't pay yourself and your employees and your rent, then you're going to go out of business. So either go out and chase the business or hire somebody that will go out and chase the business. Did I give you a straight answer?
Okay, we have another one from Patty Liu. Again, it's like, she's asking, how do you look at the global future and bring that down to the unit level or the country level?
Very carefully, because the global future is not going to do a lot of good or bad for the individual. Now, yes, if the whole world goes into war, that's going to affect the guy with the restaurant or the tailor shop or other small business down the street. But talk to them about what they want their future to be 10 years from now, and then tell them, this is how you go about finding that future, making that future. The future doesn't just happen to you, because sometimes it does, yes. But we have to make our own futures. And that's the whole idea of future studies. Anticipate what can happen. Anticipate what you want to happen, and then understand that when you have to anticipate the bad things that can happen. Nobody, hardly anybody outside of the research area expected the corona flu. Well, here it is. And now I suspect that the medical industry is going to start thinking about what's coming next and how can we be prepared. And that's what you were doing when you were talking to people about planning for their future. What do you want for your future? Is it achievable? What do you have to do to achieve that future? And that's it in a nutshell. Patty, did I answer your question?
We have 3 more questions indeed.
Okay.
So Patty she says that totally you answered the question, and she has a new question after that. Is
Okay.
How is personal or small business futures different from strategic planning? You already said a little bit before, so she's asking on the specifics of that.
Strategic planning is just one of the futures tools that you provide a small business. In the book, I go through in considerable detail for small businesses, how they can go through strategic planning, how they can go through creating scenarios. But for you as a futurist, you have a set of tools that includes strategic planning, all of the things that they need to do to create scenarios. Excuse me, I'm stuttering over myself here, but think of all the things. If you were talking to a giant corporation, what are the things that you would talk to them about? Because that's what they probably taught you at future schools, how to present these ideas or these concepts or these tools You use exactly the same tools for personal futures, for small business, and for large business. The difference is in the forces of change and the fact that you have in personal futures a set of stages that you know you're going to go through. That's very supportive for individual.
And we have two last messages. They are not questions. However, Cassiana Bossi say that thank you so much, that you inspired a lot, and she totally believes that we should care for small businesses, even in a time like this where they are going to be very affected by the whole economic situation. And thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and time here with all of us. And also we have an anonymous attendee who is very much aligned to that with that comment, and he said, thank you for sharing your insights today. It's been wonderful that you were able to join remotely despite some technical issues. And he has one question, is how is the lockdown affecting you?
Not much, really. A little harder to get groceries, but we're not having a problem. My wife and my granddaughter and I have been in the house here for a month. I go out for walks in the neighborhood. I've gone out a couple of times for prescriptions. It's the only time I've taken the car out. We are not impacted, but we're in an economic area of life that we're in Social Security, we have incomes, we have assets, but the people who have lost their jobs, who worked in restaurants, for example, and all the restaurants were closed to keep us all separated, those people are getting hurt. They're going to get a check from the government someday. Don't hold your breath. Those people, there's no jobs for them to go to. And so those are the people, and it always is, the people at the lower end of the economic scale that get hit hardest. And I think that one of the presenters today talked about that rather specifically, that they're to the effect that there is change in the future because the way we are distributing income now is not fair. Excuse me, I didn't mean to get into an editorial. I would also add, to going back to one of the previous questions, that if you as a futurist are at a point where you're not having much income, then maybe this is a good time to try to set up workshops where people can come and get free information. If they're in a Lions Club or a Kiwanis Club, they get information. A lot of them are retired, but they all have children and grandchildren. Get your own name out there. When you're at a point where you don't have where you don't have enough income, or you don't have a real career going, then get out there and build the career. Talk to people. You will be surprised. Somewhere where you least expect it, somebody will come to you and say, would you be interested in this opportunity? It has happened to me several times, very favorably. One other thing that I might add, on my website, I have two workbooks, the Personal Futures Workbook and the Small Business Foresight Workbook. The Small Business Workbook is, I'm in the process of changing, updating it and changing the cover. But those are both free downloads. I've got a whole page of free downloads, workbooks, articles that I've written about personal futures and so on. So take a look at that page. Now, as I mentioned earlier, on my web page, I have 3 addresses, but they all come into the same picture, and that is I'm standing on a stage in Turkey Istanbul talking to an audience. But if you go down to the next line, you'll see that the site is divided up into personal futures, small business futures, VerneWheelwright.com, and so on. So there's a lot of information. Take a few minutes and enjoy. I think you'll find it interesting.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Verne. We are very grateful we could finally set up all the technical issues and we were able to have the conversation with you. It's been very, very insightful to explore your knowledge and your wisdom. So thank you so much. And also in the name of the attendees, because you cannot see what they are writing, all the thank you messages. And to all the attendees, this was the last session of the summit. We will be publishing the videos as soon as we get some rest tomorrow. We will try to sleep almost 24 hours in a row. So after this, next week, we will be editing the videos and doing the post-production, and we will start publishing them so you can watch all the sessions that you were unable to follow. So thank you so much, and thank you again, Dr. Verne.
Okay, thank you, Miguel.